Today we talk about gender equality, which put really simply means equal access and opportunities for all genders. In the Global Gender Gap Report 2021 by the World Economic Forum, India has slipped 28 places to rank 140 among 156 countries. And for women in India, we don't need statistics for us to realize that gender equality does not exist. This is something we know and feel every day. Welcome to The Brown Box, a podcast in which we discuss the good, the bad, and the crazy that make up the country I love, India. This episode of the podcast is brought to you in collaboration with eShe. eShe is an independent women's magazine and blog based in New Delhi that amplifies women's voices and stories about our shared humanity.
And he said, I can't send a woman to Patna, I can't take the risk. And I think that was the first time when I felt that I lost an opportunity because of my gender.
All of these things have been told in history, but they've been told through a man's voice, written with a man's pen. And so you don't see the structural violence that brought us to these points at different times in history.
Today I discuss gender equality with two inspirational women who have very different but equally impactful stories to share. First, I talked to Suparna Sharma, resident editor of the Asian Age, Delhi. Suparna is responsible for the Delhi edition of the paper as well as the Kolkata and the London editions. In her career, which began in 1991, Suparna has worked with the Indian Express, India Today, and the Times of India. She's also a film critic at the Asian Age and Deccan Chronicle. Her film reviews often have strong opinions about the depiction of women in movies, a subject close to my heart and something that we've spoken about before here on The Brown Box. I also speak to Kirthi Jayakumar, an activist on women's rights issues and peace and conflict. I'm going to share more about Kirthi and some of the amazing work that she's done a little bit later when we dive deep into our conversation with her. But I do want to say that Kirthi joined the workforce around 2010. Now, I've mentioned the years that Suparna and Kirthi joined the workforce for a reason. They come from different generations. And whilst talking to them, I was struck by how different their worlds were, but also how similar the problems were that they faced and continue to face. Because gender inequality, especially in India, still exists. Let's begin the conversation by focusing on Suparna and her story.
Both my parents, my mother and my dad, they made many mistakes, as I think all parents do. But they were quite amazing in the sense that they never made me feel any different from my brother. I struggled with being a woman, I think. And so became very boyish. So I guess somewhere that must have sunk in somewhere. That is more powerful. That role is more empowering, or you can do much more.
I myself had a similar experience. Growing up with a sister and not a brother, I never faced the comparison between the sexes. Sure, there was a lot of comparison between my sister and me, she being the good one, the one who did her chores without being told, the smart one, the more social one, and me being, well, naughty and always getting lower marks than her. But that seemed normal, those comparisons, just the things you had to deal with as a second child. But then one day, totally in jest, just being funny, my father told me that when I was conceived, I was a mistake. They were not expecting another child at that point. That part didn't seem to bother me. It was a bit after when he said, "But we thought you'd be a boy, so it would be okay." Now that bit stuck with me forever. Again, my father was a funny man in his youth, and I never heard him express this sentiment again to us or to anyone else, about our family ever. So why was this not a joke in my head? Somewhere, somehow, subliminally. I had the same experience as Suparna. It was somehow internalized that boys were better. But let's get back to Suparna. We chat about that moment, which is defining for all girls, the growth of your breasts, which at some point means you need to wear a bra.
I remember my mother once asking me when I was, I think, 13, 14, about, that I should now start wearing a bra, which was perhaps the first instance where you think like, you feel shackled a bit and it makes you very aware of your body in a way that you have never seen yourself. Right? It's from the outside, realizing. I don't know whether it was about being different, because I don't think you think in that way, but it was about being picked on, or being made to feel that you were your body, that you were not a person, but you were your body. So that I think, uh, and that's what they wanted. These boys, these men, that's what they wanted. It wasn't about what you were saying, it wasn't about what you thought, what you did. No, they wanted something from you, which, without consent, of course, always.
That was an extraordinary insight by someone so young. And although I never asked her, I like to imagine that it was that inspired Suparna to follow a career as a journalist, where people would have to listen to what she had to say.
I have no sense of fear about myself. Like, I'm not scared. People don't scare me. Situations don't scare me. Going out alone doesn't scare me at whatever time of day, night, wherever I am. I don't know. Maybe it's bad. I don't know. I just have no fear. So, and I pursued, that's one of the reasons why I pursued crime reporting, because blood, gore, dead bodies, dismembered bodies, nothing's like, I don't, it like I can deal with it. It affects me emotionally, but I can look at it. That happened. But one of the things, I think we were also like, I'm the second generation in my family, the second generation of women to be working. My mother was working, and I was working. So, and most of us, when we joined journalism in 1992, 93, we were either first generation women who were going out to work, or the second generation. And we had this, it was kind of a thing with us, that we can do everything. So we were more boys than the boys. If we were having periods, if they didn't have a separate loo for women, nothing would deter us. We would not complain. In fact, we thought all the women who were complaining at that time were like whiners, and we just told them to shut up. But which was not the right thing to do. It's not, our bodies are different, and we have to take that into account. But we saw it as playing the gender card at that time. Right? If because the whole system was playing the gender card, we said we will not play the gender card. Because they would use it against us. They would have, they would not give us the opportunities. They would not give us whatever. So we didn't wear our. We would all dress in those loose kurtas, and just basically try to hide your tits and your. So yeah, so being more boys than the boy, that's how we dealt with it at that time.
Not playing the gender card. That is what many of us did. I started working about 7 years after Suparna, working as a production assistant on film sets. And as an ex-model of former Miss India, this was a strange choice. I could feel this constant questioning of, is she taking this seriously? Is she committed? Does she have what it takes? Not just from the men, but from the women as well. So I did many of the things Suparna did. I wore baggy clothes, no makeup, worked super hard, never said no to anything, even if it meant being out late at night. I never wanted to play the gender card. a few years later, I remember interviewing for a job as an assistant director in a production company with the director who was at that time at the top of his game. He was the go-to guy of the time. He told me, I never hire girls. I only hire boys, but let's give it a try. And you know what? I wasn't angry. I was flattered. Later, a few years later, he fired me because his wife, falsely, with absolutely no reason, let alone evidence, thought we were having an affair. So he fired me. Then I did. I got angry, but I didn't do anything. Suparna shares a similar story, working hard, doing everything that you're supposed to do, doing it well, and then losing out for no reason. No reason but you're a woman.
I think the first instance where I felt that I was being differentiated against was much later in life when I was working in my first stint at the Asian Age, when there was a post open of a state correspondent in Patna. And we were reporters, and I was a crime reporter in Delhi, and we could all apply. And I applied, and so two of us were basically contending. I and this friend of mine, and MJ Akbar. He was our editor at that time, and he spoke to both of us, kind of did whatever interview, and then he decided to give that job to this colleague of mine, this very dear friend of mine, Palash, his name was. And I was livid because I really thought I was a better reporter than Palash, and I was more, I was bolder, I was a better writer, I was and I was livid, and I went and almost screamed at MJ Akbar, and I said, what is this, and why are you sending him, why aren't you sending me to Patna? And he said, I can't send a woman to Patna, I can't take the risk. And I think that was the first time when I felt that I lost an opportunity because of my gender. That was my first realization. I'm sure I lost many others, but that was when it really meant, like, it meant a big deal. It was really like, yeah.
MJ Akbar, who many of you might know, was accused by 15 to 20 women, mostly journalists, of sexually harassing them and behaving improperly. The women gave vivid details of Akbar's sustained predatory nature and the difficulty that they faced in their interactions with him. The women included Priya Ramani, against whom Akbar filed and lost a defamation suit, journalist and author Ghazala Wahab, and Suparna Sharma, amongst others. I asked her if she felt that she was forced into a code of silence before and even during this time. Her answer was nuanced and insightful.
I think all of us who were older, like, we kept quiet for years about MJ Akbar. Our silence protected MJ Akbar. If we had spoken up, it wouldn't have happened to Ghazala, it wouldn't have happened to so-and-so, it wouldn't have happened to so-and-so, right?
She explains a little bit more about why and how this happened.
I remember when we were in college, there was this woman in IP college who was sexually assaulted on a DTC bus. I still remember because it became a big thing. And she dragged the guy out and she beat him up, and like she did. Okay. So we used to travel in DTC buses. We've had, every day we could write, like, a police complaint about today this happened. Every day we could go to the thana and give one police complaint. But yeah, maybe we could have, but that's not how we were brought up. Not how women in India are brought up. We are not. We, for everything, like for a meeting, for how to conduct yourself, we have life skills. We have tools, right? We were never given the tools to question, oppose authority, especially men in positions of power and authority. I think it's taken me years to have the words, to find the words, to articulate it. As a 22-year-old, you are so grateful you have this job. right? You are so excited by that you are going to be working with, for me in journalism, for others in academics, in all, I don't know, wherever, right? Films or advertising and modeling, and then because the power is with that person, you know that the risk you are taking is not just of that particular job, which is huge at that point. Because when you go back home and you tell this story that this happened to you, they're going to say, we told you, don't work, just get married, go. So yeah, that was, we didn't have the tools. And I don't think slapping and whatever, I like, yeah, maybe some stranger on the road, who's kind of, pinches you or brushes up. You can't hit a senior. I can't.
I jump in rather passionately because this is something that I have faced.
And then at the end of it also, I feel that that action, or in many cases, almost all action, you are still the loser. Like you are still losing.
It's my job. He's not going to lose his job. He's going to take away my opportunities. He's not going to give me these assignments. I'm going to be this person. So, but these are so internalized. We are articulating this now, but we don't even know at that point in 1993, 94, when this happened, we had no idea how to address this. We were trained to go and get stories and come and write. Right. We were not trained that if your boss, who you look up to, who you think is your great guru, is sexually assaulting you, how should you deal with it? We didn't know. I mean, I have more power to women who are able to deal with it, who are not scarred by it. More power to them. But there will always be women who don't want to, who can't, or who can't deal with this, who are unable to deal with this, and they must have that space to say their story, how they want to say their story, where they want to say it, when.
At this point in the conversation, I share or paraphrase a quote I saw on Twitter. Unfortunately, I forgot to save the exact quote, but here's what the phrase left with me. Not all men rape. Not all men are guilty of sexual harassment. But many men do enjoy the benefits that come from a society that uses these acts to make women feel fearful, at a disadvantage, or inferior. Suparna shares these facts from a recent case filed in the Supreme Court against the Indian Army. The response from the Army is the perfect example of how men continue to suppress the rights of women in order to protect their place in the world.
I don't know if you followed the Indian Army. There's a case going on. A case has been going on for years. The Indian Army takes on women only as short commission. They're not given the training that men are given. They don't go to the same courses that men go to. They are not allowed to sit the same exams that men can sit. Their pay scales are different. All their benefits are different. So women challenge this. They can't rise above the level of a lieutenant colonel. So women challenge this short commission, saying we need equal opportunity. So the Indian Army and the Indian government challenged this in court. They submitted a note in which it is appalling. It is appalling what they've done. In fact, they have listed 11 reasons why women cannot be given equal opportunity. They've given 11 reasons. They've talked about national security, that they can't risk. They have said senior women are untrainable. That women have I swear, I'm not joking. They have written women have domestic and matrimonial duties. Their words. They have said they have lower physical standards. These are women in the army who fix trucks and fighter planes, and then but the thing that really was galling was the sentence they have used where they have said equal opportunity is for equals.
You can hear the shock in my voice there, right? The good news, the Supreme Court then issued a 54-page judgment that basically rubbishes each of the 11 points presented by the Army and in return gives details of 11 women who have done outstanding work in the Army. They say, and I quote here, "You must recognize here that the structure of our society has been created by males for males." They then go on to direct the Army to consider the grant of permanent commission for women officers within a month and allow permanent commissions within 2 months after following the due process. Yes, a world created by males for males. That is the inequality that we face. I end my conversation with Suparna by asking her what she is most passionate about at this moment. She shares this surprising but totally endearing answer.
The only one female inspiring me right now is Mamta Banerjee, I think. She is, up against this juggernaut of Narendra Modi and the money power and everything. And all her trusted aides have left on the eve of elections, and she's just with her broken leg. I mean, hats off to her.
Since I spoke to Suparna, Mamta Banerjee has, of course, gone on to win the election and crushed the BJP in the state. So yes, hats off to her. And to women like Suparna who speak out against injustice, who think about and write about gender inequality, who have the strength to remain enraged about issues as they appear again and again and again. More power to her. Now let's get into my chat with Kirthi Jayakumar. At the moment, she runs the Gender Security Project, a think tank that works at the intersection of gender, peace, security, feminist foreign policy, and transitional justice. I say at the moment because Kirthi has one of the longest LinkedIn profiles I've encountered, especially in someone so young. Her career shows a woman who's constantly looking for ways to empower other women, pivoting, changing, and realigning her approaches to meet the next problem. Kirthi shares a lovely story about her childhood.
So my immediate family was not patriarchal. So for instance, my mom and dad, when they picked out names for me and my brother, they chose gender neutral names. So my name is Kirthi and my brother's name is Santosh. But the idea behind choosing these names was to make sure that we would be able to use our names regardless of our gender identities, unless we wanted to change our names. So that's the kind of mindset we were raised in, and that was automatically our default, our norm. So when we experienced the outside world, and then patriarchy was sort of given to us by the cartload, if you will, I think that's when it really hit me.
I really like that thought. Imagine writing to someone or submitting an application and knowing that you would not have to face any preconceived notions because they knew that you were a woman based on your name. But like so many women I've spoken to, Kirthi was not able to escape the biases of the rest of society, of the rest of the world.
That defining moment came to me when I was in school. I was very active as a child. I enjoyed playing cricket with the boys. I didn't think twice about being part of the team among the boys for football. But when it was grade 3, and we used to have skirts for school until grade 2, we could wear shorts. So grade 3 onwards, it became skirts, and the PT teacher would say, no, you can't play with the boys. Even if you're wearing shorts, it's not allowed. And I think that was my defining moment. And it was strange for me to really unpack that because Mom and Dad never policed me. It didn't matter what I wore. I could play whatever I wanted with my brother and male friends or male cousins. And it was never stopped. So I think, yeah, it was absurd to experience the outside world from that lens.
Yes, in so many of my conversations with women and in my own experience as well, there are two places that gender inequality first emerges when you're a young girl. The first is in what you're permitted to wear. And the second is that often you're no longer granted the permission to play sports. But for Kirthi, at a very young age, she faced so much more.
So the journey goes way back, actually. And I think, in all honesty, and of course, this is hindsight looking at things as 6 by 6, but I think my journey started at age 6 when I experienced the first instance of sexual abuse at the hands of Some folks I knew and folks I didn't know. And then I was socialized into silence around these things, which invariably culminated in a larger sense of victimhood, because I wound up moving into teenage years and adolescent years and young adult years with silence. And that silence was broken on the night of 16th of December 2012. I think everybody, doesn't just mean if you're Indian that you know what happened that night.
Kirthi is right. There's no one in India who does not know what happened on that day. But this is a story that we must never forget. And so I share the details again. On December 16, 2012, a paramedical student was gang raped and brutally assaulted by 6 men on a private bus and thrown out of the moving vehicle along with her male friend. On December 29th, she succumbed to her injuries. The victim was known as Nirbhaya, meaning fearless, and her struggle and death became a symbol of women's resistance to rape till today. This, of course, was not India's first horrific rape case, or the first that led to protest, but there was a sense that this time was different. Kirthi explains this well.
On some levels, I think stories can be powerful tipping points, powerful catalysts based on how they are told and how they are instrumentalized. And I'm using this word very carefully, because just 6 years before the incident in 2012, there was a horrific incident that targeted a young Dalit woman and her family. And the level of ghastly violence that targeted them was no less in comparison. And it's not to make a comparison between different forms of violence that I'm saying this, but to really drive home, right? But to really drive home the point that the way we instrumentalize stories to a particular ends is also about how the media presents it to us. So at that point, of course, we're talking about an upper caste girl, we're talking about a girl in the capital of the country, and we're talking about a girl like you and me out in the street. And this kind of checked all the boxes for girls like you and me that are typecasted as the norm, right? We're upper caste, we're privileged, we come from an English language speaking background, we're educated. And so when you see something like this happen to, quote unquote, even people like us, it's outrageous.
What Kirthi doesn't tell me as we chat, but what I know from various articles I find online with quotes from her, is that the day after, December 17th, she was receiving an award for her work with a US-based NGO called Delta Women at the US Consulate General at Chennai. She says, and I quote here, "I was receiving an award when there was so much more left to be done, especially when a girl was battling for her life, because we as a community sacrificed her at the altar of patriarchy, misogyny, toxic masculinity, and inaction on the part of a civilian populace that should have been more vigilant. I went to bed that night thinking of how much we had allowed to pass in the name of we are like this only." She continues by saying that it was after this that she founded Red Elephant.
That, I think, for me was my watershed moment, or a catalyst, if you will, because it was when I was young and getting into the workforce and thinking about what I would do in life, while also processing things that happened to me when I was a child and speaking out for the first time about it to my parents as well. So that phase, I think, was where everything that I've experienced from age 6 sort of found a denouement, where I was able to actually arrive at something that I think would have given me resolution. And I think in some ways I'm still looking for that resolution, because there's still so many inner children within me that are still trying to find answers for the why of it all. So 6 months after 16th December, I founded my first nonprofit.
Red Elephant was created to break the code of silence that is passed down to so many girls and women. Through the simple act of storytelling, Kirthi's idea was to take the elephant in the room, that thing that nobody wants to talk about, and paint it red so that people would be forced to sit up and take notice, to talk about it. I asked her to explain to me why storytelling is so important to her.
So Rani, I'm going to start by asking you a question. Can you Off the top of your head, without Googling, can you name for me 10 women from the Indian independence struggle?
I couldn't answer her, I have to admit.
I think this is exactly what I'm trying to look at in different ways now as the Gender Security Project and back then at the Red Elephant Foundation. Bearing witness is fundamental to our growth as a species, honestly.
What strikes me about Kirthi is her ability to see stories that other people would not see.
And everything that's happening in the world right now has really thrown life out of gear, right? Whether it's COVID, whether it's a civil war in a country, whether it's total crackdown of protests wherever you are. These stories shock the conscience, but they're not new stories. They're things that have happened before. Admittedly, COVID has knocked the wind out of our lungs, literally and figuratively, because we didn't know that a pandemic would really bring the world to a grinding halt, or maybe we didn't expect it. But think of the conflicts we have running. Think of how policies can be made without thinking about a migrant laborer's journey back home, walking miles, and perhaps dying on the way. And then think of how we're also still operating with our own privilege because we're thinking, oh, it's another lockdown. What am I going to do? I'm not meeting my friends. But what about that istriwala who's down the road from where you live, who hasn't had anything to eat for a year comfortably because hadn't had any work? So I think all of these things have been told in history, but they've been told through a man's voice, written with a man's pen. And so you don't see the structural violence that brought us to these points at different times in history. But bearing witness tries to turn that on its head and tries to place the true story of the one who was affected by the adversity of the times.
Kirthi now runs the Gender Security Project, which focuses on the issues of gender, security, justice, and peace, with the ultimate goal of building a world on the foundations of positive peace, equality, justice, and intersectionality. I end my chat with her by asking her what she's most passionate about at this moment.
Wow. Quite honestly, I think I would say I want to unapologetically promote my app. It's called Sahas, which is a tool that supports survivors across 196 countries to find help and to find also just information about what to do after facing any form of violence. So it's available as a mobile app. It's also available as a web app, as a piece of artificial intelligence, which is the form of a chatbot. And pretty soon is going to involve a virtual reality-based bystander intervention training series. So yeah, that is something I would definitely put out. I feel like it's a tool that anyone who's listening can benefit from. So yeah.
You can find out more about these two amazing women in the show notes. I had such a great time talking to both of them and have learned so much from my conversation. Do write to me and let me know about your experiences with gender inequality and how your life has been affected by it. And join me for the next episode of The Brown Box, where I talk about travel.